Today, COROS is announcing their first ever cycling computer. COROS calls it the Dura. Dura as in the Spanish word for a hard thing. And what's really amazing here is that COROS is really taking a very fresh look at how a cyclist could potentially use a cycling computer. Here, take a quick look at this chart. Over here, we've got the Hammerhead Karoo 2 and then the Karoo 3, getting about 7 and then 11 hours of battery life. You've got Wahoo devices here getting about 15 or 17 hours of battery life. Garmin does pretty well comparatively. They're getting about 26 hours of battery life on the slew of products that they sell. You can actually extend that because a lot of the Garmin cycling computers offer an option to add solar for about $100 more. And with that, you can actually expect to extend battery life really up over 30 hours. Again, of course, depending on solar conditions. But check this out. This new Dura cycling computer from COROS can go 120 hours, and that's excluding solar. Now, if you're like me and you do tend to ride on sunny days, the built-in solar panel on the top half of this device can generate 2 extra hours of battery life for every 1 hour of riding. And the details on that are fairly similar to the way that Garmin is calculating solar, meaning that the estimations are calculated with an expectation of about 75,000 lux of sunlight, which is a pretty reasonable amount of sunlight to expect. But having this much battery life and then having this much additional charge due to solar, it actually makes for some really interesting use case scenarios for cyclists. For example, because you basically don't have to charge this thing, there's gonna be a lot less need for you to take this cycling computer off your bike. As in, you might not ever need to take this cycling computer off your bike. In fact, I actually think that this is kind of one of COROS's not so secret goals. And it's super interesting because they've got a very different and unique goal here compared to a lot of the other cycling computers on the market. And there's actually a few things that kind of go along with this. Another little tiny but very unique thing about the Dura that I actually find very interesting is that you really don't ever have to turn this device off. It's much more like a watch in that regard. In fact, if you are familiar with COROS watches, you're gonna have a very good feel for how this bike computer operates. We've got this giant scroll wheel here on the right, and then a single button below it that acts as a back button. Very similar to how a watch like the COROS Pace 3 operates. So also like the watch, when you're done with your ride, you don't need to actually turn it off. You just finish your ride, and again, very much like a COROS watch, you'll press the scroll wheel in to finish a ride. And what's interesting about that is that this huge fit file that you're normally gonna have to compile and save is actually constantly being preserved and synced over to your phone, or actually your COROS watch if you happen to have a COROS watch, but it's actually doing that throughout the ride. So when you actually finish your actual bike ride, you're not gonna wait for the file to be written. It just closes out the file and it automatically uploads it. So after your ride, you can just walk away from your cycling computer, connect it to your bike, and the cycling computer will go into sleep mode after a few minutes of inactivity. Now check this out. Startup time for my Wahoo Roam, Garmin Edge 1040 Plus, and the COROS Dura. And I know this is not really like a fair fight comparing these devices, just kind of coming out of like a sleep mode versus the rest of these kind of doing like a full boot up. But I don't know, maybe it is fair. These are how we're expected to use these devices. But I've actually complained about how long it takes to boot up some of the Wahoo devices on the market. In fact, Wahoo is like, it's one of my favorite cycling computers by far, but the boot up time is just like, it's comically long. I do want to mention that there isn't a ton of buttons on this Dura device. The device does have a touchscreen. It feels somewhat responsive to me. I actually live here in the Pacific Northwest, the rain is definitely real here. Here's what it looks like, just trying to use this device in the touchscreen in the rain here. What's nice also is that you can lock the touchscreen. I say, well, maybe it's like a sort of lock the touchscreen. In the settings here, you can have the touchscreen on, or you can have the touchscreen only active for mapping screens. I actually tried using this with gloves. These are the gloves that I use for cycling for the most part. And they actually have this little like conductive patch on the tip of the index finger. So you can see like occasional issues when using gloves, but really I think it's like the gloves themselves are getting a little bit wet. But for the most part, for me, the computer feels very usable in the rain, or very usable when you're using gloves. And for me, I think like when you have your hands on the handlebars, you can easily reach up and kind of like flick that scroll wheel if you want to move pages. And then as far as connectivity goes, the device has Wi-Fi, it has Bluetooth, and it has Ant+. I connected it to my cycling radar. I connected it to a few different heart rate sensors and 2 different power meters. I didn't have any issues connecting it to all of these different items. I don't actually have access to SRAM's brand new red component set with its buttons on its shifters, and I don't have the Di2 system to actually test having like electronic buttons on your shifters that can actually shift between pages on this device. But I did ask COROS about that, and they said that that was possible. So the Dura is this brand new cycling computer from COROS with a massive amount of battery life. All the connectivity options that we need, solar panels, a touchscreen, a super fast wake time. It has a barometric altimeter, it has an accelerometer, a gyroscope, it has a digital compass, and it even has like a temperature gauge. And then maybe, like I haven't mentioned this yet, that maybe the craziest part of all that is the Dura cycling computer, it cost $250. Now here's all the stuff that you end up getting if you decide to pick up the COROS Dura device. Oh, I should mention that you do get these 2 little hex wrenches here. They're both actually for your bike mount, which does come with the Dura. A lot of the cycling computers do this. You can actually screw in the cycling mount into the back of your cycling computer. It seems like this would be like a way to kind of like securely lock your cycling computer to your bike. I don't know. I guess it is that, I guess. But the original reason for cycling computers to do this was because there was this UCI rule about the weight of bikes and anything that was bolting to them before races. So pro cyclists would be able to ride lighter weight bikes, but they can add a few grams to their bike and kind of bump it over that legal limit by adding bolted on cycling computers. I think that's the real reason that these computers have these bolts. But with the COROS Dura, if you're not moving it from bike to bike, like mountain bike to road bike, you actually might want to just screw that mount onto the cycling computer and just like forget about it. I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting to see, just how little people are going to need to charge this device. But speaking of securing your cycling computer, or your bike for that matter, there is like a security mode on this computer. So you can type in a code of whatever you want in here and the device will lock down. If it detects any motion, it'll sound an alarm. The idea is that, if you're at a coffee shop or something like that and someone tries to like steal your bike, that the siren from the computer would discourage them from stealing your bike. Now, maybe it's a good time to mention that this is in no way a full review of the Dura cycling computer. I would say that this is much more of a first look. I've actually only had this device for about a week, and I haven't had it really anywhere near enough time to test the full battery life of this device, or a lot of the other features that are in here. But the battery life claims are definitely something that I really want to dig into, potentially in a future video. Be sure to subscribe, or let me know in the comment section if you guys do want me to review this computer after having used it for 100 days or so. Now, I should also mention that this device does have dual band frequency GPS, meaning it can connect to multiple GPS types and multiple frequencies at the same time to increase accuracy. Now, I do tend to ride roads more than trails, And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't really feel like road cyclists need the extra GPS accuracy that comes with the dual frequency GPS bike computers. But I guess you've got it if you need it. But looking at some GPS tracks here, I don't really see anything super weird here. Everything looks really reasonable when cycling with these 3 bike computers. Again, that's the Wahoo Roam, kind of Wahoo's top of the line computer, Garmin's Edge 1040 device, their top of the line computer, and this COROS Dura. And if GPS accuracy is gonna be an issue anywhere, I think mountain biking is potentially where we might find issues. That or maybe if you're road cycling next to any sort of sheer rock wall, or potentially inside of a thicker city with skyscrapers that might bounce GPS signals around. But zooming in on some trails here, I see one issue from my Wahoo Roam, but the COROS Dura seems to be tracking really well for me. I did update the firmware on my Roam shortly after this ride, so hopefully I don't see issues there anymore. But this new GPS chip on the COROS Dura, you actually have a few options here. You can set it to all systems on GPS or dual frequency. If you do have it set to that more accurate dual frequency mode, it does take a little bit of a toll on the battery. You'll see about 70 hours or so as opposed to the 120 with the all systems mode. But what's really cool here is that COROS has this new automatic mode. And this is something that I'd probably suggest you just leave it in this mode by default. But basically it'll automatically switch between the more battery intensive dual frequency mode if it detects weaker GPS signals. Otherwise it'll use the more battery friendly all systems mode. So you end up with kind of like the best of both worlds. And Garmin actually has been doing something like this or something very similar for a long time now. Garmin's been calling their Sat IQ mode, and it's the mode that I use on all of my Garmin watches when I'm wearing a Garmin watch. Now, speaking of Garmin, I do want to show a few common popular cycling computers that are on the market, just as kind of a comparison to the COROS Dura. Garmin being, one of the most popular cycling computer brands. And Garmin's most popular, at least their most popular new devices, are the Garmin Edge 540 and 840. Both are actually the same size. You can't really tell them apart very easily, but they both have a 2.6-inch screen, whereas the COROS Dura has a ever so slightly larger screen. It's a 2.7-inch touchscreen display. The 540 costs $300 or $400 for the solar version. And it doesn't have a touch screen. I don't actually have it here, but it looks basically the exact same as this Edge 840. The Edge 840 is $450 or $550 for the solar edition. Main difference being the 540 doesn't have a touchscreen and the 840 does have a touchscreen. And then Garmin also makes the 1040, which is a much more expensive device. I think the solar edition that I have here is something like $750, but the screen is larger. It's a 3.5-inch screen. And then Wahoo makes the Roam, that's kind of their top of the line device, which has a similar screen size to the Dura, 2.7 inches. But to me, it kind of looks a little bit wider here. I don't know, what do you guys think? It's hard to tell with these things. But from Hammerhead, I have the Karoo 2 and the Karoo 3, which also have a little bit bigger screen. But I've also noticed that the Karoo 3 has an extremely bright screen. Again, I've kind of pumped up this screen brightness to make it as bright as it would be when comparing these cycling computers. Not that I'm 100% sure that you really need a screen that bright when you're cycling, but it's kind of fun to have, especially if you're on dark trails for some odd reason. And then as far as weight goes, the Dura kind of falls in the middle of all of these. I definitely wouldn't consider it a super heavy computer at 97 grams, but the Wahoo Bolt, that's definitely lighter. The Garmin 540 and 840 devices are a little bit lighter, and the Roam is pretty close in weight. Technically, it's just a few grams lighter than the Dura. And then obviously the computers like the 1040 or either of those Karoo devices are gonna be heavier devices. Price-wise, Wahoo does make a more affordable option than the Dura. The Wahoo Bolt is $230. But everything else, really everything else on the market that we're looking at here, all of these cycling computers, they really do tend to be, at or above $400. Now, I probably haven't had this device for long enough to dive into what I wish were different, but I'm gonna go ahead and do it anyway. I'll mention a few things here, and you guys feel free to comment in the comment section with the correct answers. But price is not one of those things. Price is definitely not gonna be on my list. When I actually heard all of the specs for this device, I kept thinking, okay, the Dura is definitely gonna cost over $400. It's gonna be $500. So I'm super pumped about the price. But I couldn't help but being a little bit disappointed when I actually fired this thing up and I noticed the screen. For me, it felt very small, or it seemed to look a little bit weird to me, especially considering like the real estate that this device has, or like the top side of this device here. The solar panels are great, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that they're there. I just think that it has an odd look to it to me. I think that I'm just not used to seeing a screen only take up part of the computer face like this. The Dura also appeared extremely dark to me when I was looking at it indoors for the first time. Now, as soon as I got it outdoors, I think that there was like a bit of a sigh of relief. To me, this thing looks absolutely fine in direct sunlight. I actually think that I'm gonna quickly get used to that solar panel being up there instead of the additional screen real estate. Again, definitely check back with me later to see if I've kind of gotten over the initial shock of the style of this device. But as of the time of testing this device, there are currently no Strava segments that you can access on the computer. And I actually think that this is it's a big gap that all the other major brands have. Will definitely need to be filled in with a software update on this device. And COROS is aware of it, and I think that their plan is to try to address that here in the next few months or so. The COROS Dura is also missing a Climb Pro screen, or I think Hammerhead calls it their Climber screen, and I think Wahoo calls it their Summit screen. But all the major brands have a really fantastic detailed screen about the climb that you're on or the climb that you're about to do. And these are awesome. You can see stuff like elevation, how much climbing you have to do, details about the grade that you're on, as well as what's coming up. It's a super cool feature, and again, it's something that's currently missing from the COROS Dura, but they're planning on building it into this device towards the end of the summer. And then as far as mapping goes, I didn't do a ton of testing on navigation, but I did notice that maps aren't nearly as detailed as some of the other devices on the market. For example, my Garmin is actually showing road names, and actually they're even showing trail names here, which is super cool. And you don't get that with COROS. I did find adding offline maps super easy with this device. I did all of that right after setting up the device with the COROS mobile application on my smartphone. Super easy, just click the region that you wanted to download and it synced right over to your device. But COROS also mentioned that they are working on making turn-by-turn directions a little bit more responsive. They're adding ride with GPS compatibility in the near future. They're also adding an air temperature data field, and eventually they're even planning to add media controls for your audio or video, whatever's playing on your smartphone over a Bluetooth connection. So a lot of work for COROS's development team. And I did find a few bugs and issues with these kind of early beta editions of software that I've been running on this device. I would definitely say that if you are an early adopter, you can expect to witness some of these issues. I actually think that it's very common to see bugs and issues and missing items when a company does release a product in an entirely different category like this. But COROS is going to continue to work on this. They're not actually going to be shipping devices until mid-July. But overall, I'm super impressed with the COROS Dura. Is it perfect? It's definitely not. But I am extremely impressed with what this thing offers, especially at this price point. And I do think that a lot of early adopters are gonna find issues and bugs, but I also think that that's just part of being on the very bleeding edge with new products like this. But for a certain type of rider, for someone who might be doing like bike packing, and not even like short bike packing trips, you could theoretically go for a really long time with this device and not have to worry about charging this thing forever. But for a certain type of rider, I do think that this is gonna be a godsend device. And really, at this price point, actually, I think it's gonna appeal to a very broad audience. I'm pretty hopeful that COROS is gonna catch up on some of the software side of things that I think that this product will need. And if that's the case, I think this product is gonna be a really good option for a lot of people. But what do you guys think? Is this something that you would consider? What do you think of the idea of just leaving your cycling computer on your bike indefinitely? I don't know. I think it's super interesting. I think it's like an interesting paradigm shift. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Comment section is right down below here. It's right below the like button and the subscribe button. While you're down in the comment section, do let me know if this is something that you'd like me to double back on and talk about after having used for 100 days. But either way, new cycling computer or no computer at all, I really do hope that you're getting out there, swimming, biking, running, rinsing, and repeating it all over again. And we will see you guys on the next one.